Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for our live stream here at MarketBeat on what is a huge week for earnings. We are going to be diving into all things earnings this week, kind of previewing some of the really big ones yet to come this week, and also going over some of the big ones that have already happened and what the market has been doing and reacting to some of the earnings that have come out. So we've got all kinds of earnings to talk about. We want to hear from you. We want to hear which companies you are interested in learning more about. Thanks to those who've already told us what you want to learn more about on our question of the day today on our YouTube channel. We so appreciate you guys following along. All right, you recognize these faces if you're on our channel a lot. We love our subscribers. Thanks to everyone who subscribed. But we have Thomas Hughes and Chris Markoch with us today to break down all of these earnings. Thanks, guys, for joining us for this live again.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Bridget.
Yeah, now let's go into Chris. Why don't you start us off with talking about some of the big names that retail investors everywhere are watching this week?
Yeah, there's a reason why this week's considered like the biggest week on the earnings calendar because there's something here for any investor. Of course, you've got a lot of the Mag 7 reporting this week, Meta and Apple and Microsoft all report. But you've also got some consumer staples names. Coca-Cola reports before the bell tomorrow, Mondelez reports afterwards. Starbucks reports, I don't remember if it's before or after, but they report tomorrow. We're also going to hear from Spotify. And there's a lot of curiosity there about whether they're going to do kind of what Netflix did. But then you've also got industrial stocks like Caterpillar, and then we close the week with big oil. So I don't think the reports from Exxon and Mobil and Chevron are going to be, world beaters, but it's going to be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be following those stocks and a lot of the names that you just mentioned. Such a big week for the Mag 7. But last week was kind of a big week too. Thomas, why don't you break down some of the big companies that have already reported just last week and maybe a little bit the week before?
Yeah, we're now going to like the third or the fourth week of the season, and we've seen reports from the big banks. We've seen a few of the Mag 7 report. We saw Google and Tesla both report. Those were kind of two different directions for two different reasons.
Right.
We'll talk about those in a little while. The banks were good. Verizon, AT&T reported. They did pretty well. That's awesome in my opinion because Verizon is this really awesomely low valuation stock, super high yield. It's got steady growth there. It's improving its margins. For me, this stock is on track for a long-term sustained uptrend, a valuation gain trend. It's just a matter of time for the market to kind of get behind it and drive it higher. Some other great names was AbbVie and Intuitive Surgical. So MedTech and Pharma is both doing very well. They both seem to be pretty well positioned regarding tariffs. AbbVie in particular had a really, really fantastic report, kind of affirmed the outlook for them and getting past their patent cliff and moving past Humira.
Yeah, that sounds great, guys. Well, let's dive into a few of those names you just mentioned. Thomas, I want to talk about the first one, the big one that everyone wants to talk about, and that is Alphabet. The stock has already had a little bit of a rebound post earnings, so it had to have gone pretty well. Let's talk about that.
We're right, outperforming on the top and the bottom line. But Google is kind of an example of what's been happening with the market in general. As the year started and the tariff situation kind of came into play and the higher for longer interest rate situation extended, there was a massive market reset, resetting the earnings outlook. And that happened to Google, Alphabet as well. So the analysts reduced their earnings outlook. So what happened is they set the bar too low for Q1. We've outperformed in Q1. But also the forward outlook is still positive. It's not as robust as it was, but we're still looking for growth, and we have outperformance in Q1. So the market is really set up well for a rebound, and I think that we'll see more similar results across the tech space as this week unfolds.
Yeah, it could be a thing of yet to come with all of the different Mag 7 tech companies reporting, like you said, still ahead. Quite a few that people are watching this week. Or not Thomas, Chris, do you have any thoughts on Alphabet that you want to add? It was a really highly anticipated one that seems hopefully kind of foreshadowing, like Thomas said, the rest of earnings seasons for these big tech companies.
Yeah, I think Thomas nailed it. I think the bar was set pretty low for Alphabet and they cleared it. And I think it's just going to be, do investors have enough confidence that that's going to continue over the next several quarters? I think what's interesting about a lot of the Mag 7, and I heard it said today, it's really interesting that like people tend to think of the Mag 7 as a group because that's how they've traded for much of the last 2 years. But really, all of the Mag 7 have such different catalysts and different headwinds that could potentially do. I mean, Apple's a tariff story, clearly. and they're not even going to report guidance when they report later this week. But like Microsoft's a totally different story. Meta's a different story still. So I mean, that's just so interesting because
Right.
we think of them collectively, but they're all so different right now. It's really interesting.
But they're facets of the AI story. They're
Yeah,
all leaders and entrenching themselves as AI leaders in different areas of the AI industry.
yeah,
There's infrastructure, there's services, there's the agentic apps, and so they've all got their fingers in a different part of the pie, and they've
yeah.
all kind of cemented themselves as these players.
Yeah, I want to move on to another one. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on it because so many people have kind of dove into this one the last week. But let's talk about Tesla a little bit. It was a really rough earnings for this company, kind of expected though.
Right. It was expected, and I think the actual results were a little bit worse than the delivery figures had been forecasting, had been foreshadowing. Uh, but this is a problem that Elon Musk did to himself. His involvement with Doge, his involvement with the Trump administration has got his target market at odds with him, and so they're voting with their wallets. They're trading in their cars. They're not buying Teslas, and that shows in Tesla's results.
Mhm.
Yeah, Chris, any different take on what's happening with Tesla and their earnings?
Again, I don't disagree with Thomas. I mean, this was an Elon Musk story, and it's kind of strange. Not strange in the sense that it's unbelievable that it is, but it's just strange because um again, it just takes Tesla and it kind of takes it down to it's just a car company. I don't necessarily think it is just a car company. And I think if you look at the valuation that way, then Tesla seems like a bargain right now. But at the same time, it's kind of one of those things is you just can't fight what's going on right now. And right now there's just a lot of noise around Tesla, and it makes it very difficult to take a long position in right now.
Yeah. It is more than a car company, but it makes its money by
Yeah.
selling cars, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's
You're right. You're right. That's
it's
that's where the money is right now.
It's very true. All right, guys, I want to try and share the chart for this next one. So give me a minute. We're
Okay.
pulling up JP Morgan Chase. You want to talk about the bank stocks a little bit here because there's a lot going on in those companies. Let's talk about JP Morgan. They were one of the first to report this earnings seasons, right? Who wants to take that one first?
Sure. I can start with that. It was a good report. They outperformed. They're growing robustly. They showed strength across all their segments. There was some cracking in the consumer, but consumer is still pretty strong. The tier one capital ratios were very strong. Capital position is very strong. They gave good guidance. We're looking ahead for some pretty good guidance. The higher for longer interest rate scenario is keeping the net investment income very high. But then again, we've also got good business and commercial business, and consumer business is strong. Markets business was strong. And those results were really echoed across the banking sector. So all the different banks kind of have specialized or specialties in different areas, but those metrics have been echoed by Bank of America and the other banks that have been reporting.
Yeah, anything else in the banking sector to talk about? Are we seeing other banks reporting now in this last week that are kind of following what JP Morgan is doing?
Well, I would say that the trend is generally positive, that the banks for the most part are reporting well. And I would especially like to point out the smaller regional banks that are also reporting well. They've got a pretty good amount of insulation from tariffs and the global threats, and they make good cash flow, and they're growing, and they pay good dividends.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. What Thomas said. I know we heard there were some really good results coming in from a regional like Huntington. They came in really strong, and so that's encouraging to see because they're closer to that small business area, and we want to see that be strong and healthy. If that starts showing cracks there, that's where we're really going to start having some alarm bells.
For sure. All right. Well, other names that you guys want to just point out about that I've already reported, we're about to get to previewing some of the big earnings reports coming up yet this week. Again, let us know in the comments what you're thinking, what you're interested in watching this week. We want to hear from you too. But guys, why don't you go ahead and talk about some of those last few names that have already reported? Chris, I know you followed Intuitive Surgical. Tell us what that earnings was like for that company.
Yeah, so the earnings report was good for Intuitive Surgical. I think one of the questions is they're kind of an interesting tariff story because the larger the products that they're synonymous with is their Da Vinci systems, and those are pretty much free from tariffs. Those are manufactured almost 100% in the United States, so those will be fine. Some of their other products, they do have tariff exposure on there, and Intuitive Surgical acknowledged that there will be some price pressures on those. Overall, strong report. Analysts are still bullish on it, but right now I don't necessarily know if you're going to see a big lift. It's trading right around its 50-day moving average right now. If it breaks above that, then I think investors might get more excited about buying into a future rally. But right now, it'll be interesting to see if it breaks above that level.
Yeah, I know another interesting one, Thomas, that you can talk about is ABBV. They had a pretty good rally after their earnings last week.
Yeah, AbbVie was a great story. This is kind of the poster child for the pharmaceutical patent cliff issue. Many of the pharmaceutical companies were facing patent cliffs over the last couple of years. AbbVie was able to move past it by diversifying away from its core business, which is Humira. So now its new leading drugs are Rinvoq and Skyrizi. They're accounting for about 60% of the revenue, most of the growth, but all of the sectors are growing all the segments are growing pretty strongly. It's guiding strongly. Cash flow is still robust, and we're also looking at pretty strong dividend growth for this stock. AbbVie is technically a dividend king because of its association with Abbott. It's only been around since about 2014, so not really a dividend king or an aristocrat. But with that pedigree, we say that it is, and it's tracking in that direction. So this really is a great long-term buy for dividend growth investors.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very good story. I think that's a good way to wrap up our conversation on the earnings that have already reported and get into the meat of this conversation today. And that's what's coming up. This, like Chris said, such a huge week. Everyone is watching earnings this week because there's some really big ones, including like half of the Mag 7, I think, this week.
Right.
Let's talk about that first big Mag 7 stock. Let's talk about Microsoft to start it off. I'm going to pull up the chart as you guys kind of get us started on what's riding on this earnings report this week.
Well, it's the performance and the guidance, right? So like we were saying before, there's been a big reset with the earnings outlook. Microsoft's earnings outlook was reset. We're still looking for growth, but at a slower pace than last year and a little bit slower than what was previously expected. The bar has been set low, so we're also looking for some pretty strong performance relative to this consensus estimate. And then it comes down to the guidance. Is AI spending being consistent? Can we expect it to be consistent moving forward? Is growth going to be sustained moving forward, or are we looking at a real slowdown in growth?
Yeah, for Microsoft, I think I agree with Thomas. There's gonna be a huge focus on. They kind of shook up the market a little bit when it was like, well, we're gonna back off a little bit on that data center spending, and investors are going to want to hear that they're committed to what level of spending are they committed to. To me, it's going to come down to a lot of the cloud spending. Microsoft's known as one of the leaders in the cloud, and investors are going to want to see robust cloud growth with Azure, and we're going to see how they report on that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I think much like Alphabet kind of setting the tone, Microsoft's going to set the tone, I think, for a lot of the tech names coming up. I know we have almost a month before NVIDIA reports, but obviously many investors can't wait to see what comes with that one because it's been affected so much recently. The next one has already seen such a big turnaround, and that's Apple. Huge moves in the stock over the past couple of weeks. Kind of what's behind that rally? And let's give me a second. I'll pull up that chart too. Chris, do you want to start talking with what's been going on with Apple recently?
Sure. I think the reason why the stock's been rallying is because the Trump administration announced that at least temporarily, smartphones are going to be exempt from the more draconian tariffs, whatever level that is coming out of China. And but there's still a lot of uncertainty as far as what that's going to actually come out to be. Apple's been aggressively moving at least parts of their supply chain to India and Vietnam and other countries, but even those countries aren't necessarily tariff proof. So it's going to be a very interesting quarter. I expect Apple's probably going to have a fairly good quarter because there's probably a lot of people that if you were going to buy an iPhone, if you were on the sidelines, you've probably gone ahead and bought that. But with them not offering guidance, as I've heard they're not going to be offering guidance, I think it's going to make it pretty interesting to see if the stock can go up much higher from here. I still like the stock long term, but I think it's a stock that's hard to love right now.
Yeah, there's been so much movement. Like you said, I know you kind of explained a lot of the moves that we've seen in the stock, but just in the last month,
Yeah.
the swings have been pretty
Right.
intense, from 223 all the way down to 172, back up to 210 now, where it's kind of been riding.
Right.
We're not necessarily seeing that pre-earnings big increase. Could that happen before? I believe it's Wednesday, right? Apple's on Wednesday. Could we see any movement in the next couple of days?
We could, and I would say, because I would expect to see the Q1 results be pretty strong. The tariff impact and the slowdown related to trade war woes won't really be felt until the second quarter, and not really fully until the third quarter. So that's why we've been saying, and why I believe that the Q1 estimates are too low. The bar's been set too low. They've been pricing in those tariffs into the Q1 results, and it's just not going to be seen there. But like Chris was saying, with the guidance is going to be extra important now, because we have to understand what the company is looking forward to in the coming quarters once the tariff impact becomes fully realized. And
Right.
Apple, like some other companies, instead of saying, hey, we're expecting results to be lower, they're just saying, we don't know what it's going to be. So it's introducing ultimate maximum uncertainty to the market. And that's really not a good thing for volatility, especially in a market that's already kind of skittish and could be ready to sell at a moment's notice.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I was wrong on the date. Apple's Thursday. It's not
Yes.
Wednesday.
Thursday. Mhm.
Thursday.
Yeah.
The one that's coming up on Wednesday is Meta. And I know, Thomas, this is a stock you like to talk about a lot too, as more than just a social media company. This is really a tech company. So let's talk about what's been going on with Meta over the last couple of weeks leading up to earnings.
Well, the stock has really just kind of been consolidating along with the rest of the market. It had a pretty good correction with the rest of the market, but like the other Mag 7 stocks, there's been a reset with the outlook. I do expect Meta to outperform pretty robustly. They've been firing on all cylinders. Their use of AI on their business is an example of why all businesses need to use AI, because it improves internal efficiencies, but it also improves their results. It improves their user metrics. It's helping them engage with more users, drive more ads, get more revenue per ads. It's providing multiple tailwinds to the business. So I do expect to see a pretty robust report. And I would also expect to hear them give some pretty solid guidance, because so far as I know, Meta has a very, very low tariff exposure. They sell very few products. It's all on the internet. So yeah, I expect a good report and some pretty good guidance.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over a few, we're gonna go over some more stocks. I love the questions that are coming in, guys. Please keep them coming. Chris, while I'm talking a little bit here, can you pull up Meta's earnings data so that we can kind of go over? MarketBeat has some new features where you can look at all of this earnings data right on MarketBeat's website. You don't have to go dig around and look for some of these earnings calls or the data. It's all right on MarketBeat. So Chris, if you can pull up and share that screen from MarketBeat, that would be great. But yeah, guys, I'm seeing these comments coming in. So Chris and Thomas, just so you know, to be prepared, we're going to talk about one wants to know ASML, the future of that stock. We've got a couple people who are interested in hearing about housing stocks and how those are performing this earnings season. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But let's finish this discussion on Meta a little bit, because again, this is a big one everyone's watching. And Chris, walk us through how people can watch this earnings call live right on MarketBeat.
Yeah, so this is just another way that MarketBeat's really a one-stop shop for investors. So when they report, you're going to be able to see their investment deck right here when they come out with it. So that's going to be the slides that go along with the presentation. You're going to get to see the press release for their earnings report. You can get the transcript of their conference call right here, as well as the 10K for their annual report and the press release for their 8K. So it's pretty much all the information you need to know. From, if you just want the headline results, you can get that. If you want to drill deeper, you can get that in the deck. And then if you want to read what was actually talked about in the conference call, including analyst questions and answers, it's right there as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of data for basically anyone looking for anything earnings related, you can go back and find all of this in one stop. And so it's pre-earnings. If you want to watch the call or listen to the call live on MarketBeat, you can. But then also it's so easy to look at the transcript and find what you're looking for right on MarketBeat after earnings have reported. So love this new feature. Our software dev team has been working really hard on it. So we wanted to show it off a little bit as we talk about these earnings reports coming in. So let's get into housing stocks. Which housing stocks do you guys know about that have reported maybe already or are coming up soon?
I don't think we've had too many already report. I think
I
that we have
agree. I
some
don't think we have.
coming up this week, maybe. But I'm expecting to see some pretty decent results for this quarter and some guidance for the second quarter. I know the most recent new home sales data was surprisingly strong. I think that it was up 7%. I know that the starts and the permits figures aren't quite as strong, so the guidance might not be super robust. But I think that there was some front running of some inflation and some interest rates over here over the spring, and the warmer weather especially was credited. So I think that there could be some pretty good results. But generally speaking, I like the home builders. They have good cash flow. They do really great capital returns. Right now, the stocks are down pretty significantly. They're definitely in a place where I would want to be buying them more if I had some room in my portfolio for them. But yeah, I think the housing stocks are pretty solid investments, and right now they're pretty good discounts, and they should be reporting pretty strongly.
Yeah, I just double checked this Polk Group. They did report last week. I thought I had heard they did, and they had a double beat. So it wasn't a massive double beat, but it was a double beat. So that might be a good portender to what's going to be coming out with the housing stocks coming up.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on what happens in the housing sector a little bit more. And then I'm also, I want to get to another company that everyone is following closely, and that's SMCI. There has been a lot of debate over this stock. The stock has had a lot of moves recently. I'll pull up the chart here in a minute,
Right.
but that earnings report is just tomorrow. So any thoughts on what we might expect to hear from SMCI, Thomas?
Um, I think this report could spark a pretty significant rally in the stock. The company has been able to regain some credibility with its accounting practices. The results should be pretty strong. They should reflect the robust demand for NVIDIA products. Right now, I'm looking at the chart. It looks like the stock price is pretty well consolidated and stabilized in the mid 30s. It looks ready to go. All we need is a strong report, and I think we're going to get one.
Yeah, what do you think, Chris, about some of the controversy with SMCI and the accounting details? Are we past that? Is there still some question leading into earnings of, okay, there's a lot of scrutiny on, are they actually going to report things accurately and on time like they're supposed to?
I think that's largely behind them. I think they put that to bed, and they needed to, and they did. And obviously you don't want to hear it happening again, but I don't perceive that happening. And I think, like Thomas said, if you look at the chart action, you see a stock that it looks like it's primed to move higher, and all it needs right now is to deliver a solid earnings report, which I agree with Thomas. I think they will.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
on the realm of chip stocks, let's go into AMD. I think that one's reporting soon as well.
Right.
AMD has been a rough one for investors, kind of during this whole market crash the last couple of months,
Yeah.
really. AMD's just
Mhm.
been on a downward spiral a little bit.
It is. It's kind of the ugly duckling. Everybody, and me included, expected it to have the same kind of boom and surge as NVIDIA did, but NVIDIA's first mover advantage,
Yeah.
plus the time lag between when the boom started and when they're actually able to meet production, has caused NVIDIA to gain a lot of market share. AMD hasn't really been able to experience the same boom that NVIDIA has, but it's still doing very well. So then again, in the correction, it didn't rise as much in the surge, and then in the correction it fell harder. But to me, that's opening up a deeper opportunity, a better opportunity to get in, because long-term AMD is still very well positioned to not just sustain its position in the cloud, but to gain some market share. It is building out its stack, its AI infrastructure. There is high demand for its products, and its other segments are also performing well. There's demand for its Ryzen chip lines for PCs and for gaming. I was just reading earlier today that the gaming chip that was just released was sold out almost instantly. So I'm looking for AMD to report strongly based on its own metrics. It's not going to report robustly the way that NVIDIA has. I think that those kind of gains are still in the future for AMD. centered more on the IoT and the PC revolution. But that being said, AMD should still report a pretty good report for itself and sustain the outlook for higher share prices.
Chris, I want to hear your take on AMD. I don't think I've ever heard your take on AMD. Are you a believer that the stock is going to see a turnaround, or are you thinking the crash is going to continue for this company?
I think it's been oversold. I mean, it's down 40% in the last year, and I think the expectations are so high because of what NVIDIA is delivering, and I hear what Thomas is saying, and I can't say I disagree with it. I think they're being judged against a bar that's not theirs. If you compare them to what their results are, I think they're fine. This is a company that I in the couple of times I have talked about them, I've said, great CEO, great leadership, company that constantly has the very pleasant habit of under promising and over delivering, and you like to see that. And I think you're going to keep on seeing that. It's just right now they're not NVIDIA, and that's not their fault, but they're not NVIDIA. And I think that is where the opportunity lies for investors, is because they're still a solid company, and I just think they're being compared to something that they're not, and they shouldn't be compared to.
Yeah, that's a really fair point, that there's such a big comparison riding on them. But I mean, right now, if you look at NVIDIA's stock price and AMD's stock price, they're both kind of struggling a little bit.
Right.
And again, we've got a month before NVIDIA reports, and a lot, especially right now, a lot can happen in a month. But let's just talk a little bit about NVIDIA and how that stock is performing. Again, under $100 in the last couple of weeks, something a few months ago we wouldn't have ever thought was coming for this stock.
Right.
What's been going on in the most recent couple of weeks?
Just an ongoing rotation. I mean, some investors are taking profits, other investors are getting in. We've got news-driven volatility in play, a lot of uncertainty. But what I'm seeing in the chart is this market is moving sideways within a range. The last couple of weeks, we've really shown some good positive signs of support at critical levels that not only confirm support at the bottom of the range, but also are in alignment with an uptrend. So as long as this upcoming report is good and doesn't like alter the outlook, all of a sudden NVIDIA's, this in doom, the uptrend should continue, because you got to remember that even with this reset, even with the slowdown in earnings growth, analysts are still projecting double-digit growth through the middle of next decade. All right, so that's a lot of growth. This stock is deeply undervalued relative to those forward outlooks. So as soon as the market's able to start saying to itself, it's time to buy stocks versus, oh, I'm too scared to put my money into anything, NVIDIA will start moving higher again.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I've got a couple other stocks. We've covered a lot already, a couple other companies we want to talk about before earnings. But at first, I have just a couple general questions about this earnings season and the reports that have coming in. You just mentioned analysts' outlooks. Do you guys expect a lot of revisions from analysts after this round of earnings?
Oh, absolutely. It's already been happening. That's one of the things that I cover in the weekly preview is the earnings outlook. And so one of the things I'm seeing is we've got this reset, and it's causing the market to stumble and to have to consolidate and correct and reestablish its base of support and get back in line with the trend. But the trend is still positive. We're still looking for earnings growth. We're still looking for earnings growth to accelerate from this quarter to the next quarter. One of the stumbling blocks that's coming up ahead that might happen, though, is that the forward outlook for earnings has been falling. And right now we're in a position where instead of having sequential acceleration from Q1 to Q2 to Q3, it could be flat earnings growth. So right around like 6-7% all 3 quarters, or worst case scenario, earnings growth will start to decelerate in the next quarter and then the next quarter linked to tariffs or what have you. And that would really be bad news for the market. That would probably cause us to top out, and if not enter a deeper correction, at least stall where we are and remain in this sideways range for quite some time.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a lot riding on this round of earnings, but kind of like you alluded to earlier, guys, I think the tariffs, I want to talk about whether that's going to show up in this round of earnings reports yet. Chris, do you think that everything that's been happening with tariffs, the companies that have had stock price reactions because of different tariff announcements, are we going to see any of that actually reflected in earnings?
I don't think so, not for this quarter. I think the interesting thing is going to be, what do you hear companies say about the next quarter and the quarter
Right.
after that? And like we were talking about with Apple, um, you know, if what I'm hearing is correct and Apple's not going to offer guidance, that's going to be a problem, because it's going to introduce
Right.
maximum uncertainty. And I think that's really what you're dealing with. You've had companies that have come out with alternate guidance. They've said,
Right.
well, if you've got the best case scenario would be this, the worst case scenario would be this.
Right.
And that also doesn't necessarily make a lot of investors confident. So
That
the
was,
interesting thing to me is going to be um, what's going to happen with trade agreements in the next, let's say, 30 to 60 days. And we can only hope that there's going to be trade agreements in the next 30 to 60 days, because once those start coming in and analysts can start, sharpening their pencils and doing all this, you're going to see, I think, even other revisions coming in before the second quarter earnings season starts. So
oh yeah, right.
I think it's going to be wild. And I think investors just have to, they just have to, focus in on stocks that they have a lot of conviction in.
It's going to be wild is a great way to look at it. I think this is
Oh,
one
I
of
think
the,
it is. Yeah.
yeah, one of those earnings seasons where we're just not quite sure what's going to be happening.
Right.
The last
There
couple,
is, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
talk about tariff impact in the upcoming earnings. NVIDIA will reflect an impact because they
Yeah.
said they're going to experience a charge, but this is expected to be a non-cash charge related to inventory and future sales of the H20 chip to China, right? And so that's a concern for NVIDIA. It will impact their forward outlook, but a lot of analysts are saying that it doesn't really matter because the H20 capacity will just get used up by the Western demand. There's already so much demand for Blackwell. They'll just shift from H20 to the regular full powered line and then go from there.
yeah, well, we will absolutely be covering all of NVIDIA. We've done it the last few times they've reported earnings. We'll cover that live too. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this live. It's again, just like the third time we've tried this. It's kind of fun to see your comments coming in too. One of the comments, I'm so glad you asked about talking about Palantir. It's the last one I kind of say for the end because this stock has been going wild and it's one of Chris's favorites. So of course
Sure.
we're going to talk about Palantir. Let me share the stock chart right now, just because it has been such an interesting one to watch. I don't think it's quite working. Let me try one more time. Anyways, Chris, why don't you get us started off while I try to figure out getting the chart up
Sure.
about kind of what's been going on with Palantir.
Well, Palantir dipped a lot since it hit an all-time high in January or February, excuse me, and it came down quite a bit, and now it kind of broke out of what they call a descending wedge pattern, and it's moving up, and there are some analysts that believe it might go and pass that high that it had in February. Right now, from a stock price perspective, we all know that Palantir's sort of divorced from any fundamentals, and it's kind of going to do what it's going to do. The key thing I think that investors are going to be listening for in the earnings call, which comes on Monday, is what are they saying about defense spending? Because what was really starting to weigh on the stock was this idea that if you're going to cut the budget and if military spending is going to get cut, that seemed to say if Palantir is a consultant for the government, then their revenue could get cut.
Right.
So far, that doesn't seem like it's the case.
And that was the same thing with ServiceNow. All right. ServiceNow has got government contracts, but what happened? The government's cutting out all these people and they're leaning into automation, which is going to be good for Palantir probably.
Exactly. So I think that's what investors have to listen to on the call. I don't expect I don't imagine that the CEO Alex Karp is going to tell investors anything other than the fact that that they have nothing to worry about with the government revenue. And I wouldn't be surprised if Palantir does make a charge back to that February high. Having said that, I've said it before, Bridget, we've talked. Fundamentally, Palantir's overvalued. It doesn't mean it can't go higher. Investors just have to approach the stock with conviction and say, where do you think it's going to be in 5 years? If you're a long-term investor, you can't really worry about the noise in the stock. You just have to let the stock do what the stock's going to do. And I know that might be uncomfortable to say when it drops down, as it did earlier this year, to under $80 and stuff like that. But that's the ride you're on. But if you're a trader, certainly you'd have to start thinking that, yeah, Palantir's starting to look a little toppy, even if they go higher after earnings. It's just something you have to be careful about. And I'm just being realistic.
Right.
But again, if you're a long-term investor, you kind of have to know what ride you're on and where you think the stock's going to be at 5 years. And I still don't think there's a reason to get out of the
Right.
stock right now.
No, not with Trump pledging to increase government spending by 12% next year. Palantir is certainly well positioned to benefit from that,
Right.
not only with automation and efficiency, but also with government insight and threat detection and security.
Yeah.
So, like what Chris is saying, yeah, Palantir's long-term uptrend it's intact.
Yeah, I loved the phrase you used, Chris, to say kind of divorced with the fundamentals. That's a great way to put what's happening with
Oh, it
Palantir
is.
now.
And I would be irresponsible not to say that, Bridget, because it is. But as I've said before, that doesn't mean the stock can't go higher, and it doesn't mean that it makes it a bad long-term stock. A lot of people that are pushing and saying Palantir is overvalued are also people that are looking to make it as a trade. And if you're looking to make it as a trade, then yeah, I would be hesitant to get in on it at this level.
Well, right.
Yeah.
I mean, trading 60 times this year's earning is one thing if you're
Right.
not growing, but if your forecast puts you at 10 times 2035, then there certainly is some room for some upside. You just got to time your entries.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of our commenters, I wanted to share this because I thought it was a great comment. He said, for Palantir, is it a sustainable PE ratio at 593? I mean, it's one of the fundamentals. That's not so great.
Right. But like I said, what is it versus 2035? How robust is the growth? How accurate are the targets? Because with Palantir, a lot of the forecasts are off. You know, it's been outperforming.
Yep.
It's gaining momentum. We have an outlook for increased government spending next year. So those forecasts could be really bad. So the valuation could be totally off.
Right.
Yeah, I think any company you see growing this much, almost 500% growth in 1 year, you're going to have a bunch of swings, and if trying to find the true value of the stock is interesting. Go ahead.
They beat, but they're hyper growing and they're accelerating. Right. It went from like 85% to 100%.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we saw so much of that. That's kind of how I wanted to finish out this conversation on earnings calls, is that there's just so much in the last couple of months, maybe 6 months to a year, we saw so much hyper growth in all of the AI stocks and all of these tech companies like Palantir, that would just see 500% growth in the kind of market that we're in right now. With this earnings report and this earnings season's coming up, are we expecting any companies to experience that kind of hyper growth, or will that number be a lot less just because of what's going on in the market?
Well, with the big companies, the hyper growth is slowing because of the law of large numbers. You can only grow at like 20% for so long. It's eventually going to fall to 15 and then to 10, but you're still growing by hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter. And so that's one of the headwinds for the big cap stocks right now. As far as the big hyper growth names, I think that they're coming. It's going to be part of the second wave of AI, the services wave of AI that's been building momentum, and it could start showing up anytime. It's just a matter of when it does.
Yep.
Good. Well, before we close today, we had a couple of last minute questions pop in. We can't get to every stock. I wish we could. I really appreciate the suggestions. Anything quick on BBAI?
I don't know if I'm familiar with that one. Let's check it out real fast.
I'm not.
Yeah. And then a more general question that we had come into the chat was just a general outlook of REITs and BDCs in general for 2025. Would love to hear your thoughts on kind of what you think of the REIT market. I know we had a guest on in the last month or so that said that's a good place for safety in this kind of market environment. Any of your thoughts on REITs right now?
I guess I would say, I think it would depend on what type of REIT we're talking about, but yeah, I can't say I would be, multifamily probably would be a good place to be, as long as single family housing remains tight. That might be a good place to be. I've been a fan of some of the ones that are specializing in healthcare, especially for the boomers that are aging and looking for that sort of those facilities to go to that have the continuing care from everything from independent living to assisted living to nursing care. Those are going to be probably good ones to look at, but I think you have to be selective, but I think it could be a good sector.
Good.
Tom, did you find anything on the one chart on one side?
Yeah, Big Bear AI. It's AI is some government contracts. It seems like it should be a pretty decent stock, but some of the headlines I'm looking at suggest there could be some funding problems. So maybe just be aware of that.
Good. Well, guys, thank you for breaking down so many stocks. We covered a lot of ground today. And again, this is new for us. We so appreciate those of you who tuned in for the live stream. And for those who are watching it later, thanks again for watching all of our content and our discussion. Please join us all the time. Chris and Thomas, you'll see them on this channel every week. We do a video at least once a week with each of these guys, and they have a lot of great insights to share and a lot of good stock ideas to go over too. So if you're not a subscriber to our channel yet, we hope you will. Stay tuned and join us for all the live streams that we try during this busy earnings season. Thanks.